Welcome everyone to this seventh monthly interfaith webinar that the Open Mosque holds on various subjects. This month, of course, it's on the issue of what to do with coronavirus during the age of, in terms of celebrating holy days in our respective faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And we have four rather talented and really fantastic speakers. One is from Jerusalem in Israel, one is from Abilene, Texas in the United States, the other is from Pretoria in South Africa, and the last speaker will be from Tbilisi in the Republic of Georgia. So the format, very briefly, is that everyone will be speaking for about 20 minutes, and then we move on straight to the next speaker. And then at the end of these four sessions, we then open up the floor for questions, comments, and so forth. So our first speaker tonight will be Rabbi Analia Bors. She's from Israel, from Jerusalem. She's both a ordained Latin American female rabbi who completed her rabbinical studies in Jerusalem, and she's also a qualified medical doctor. So it's quite rare, but a theologian as well as a medical professional. And she's been selected as a recipient of the BBC's 100 Most Influential Women Award 2 years ago. So we are very pleased and proud to have Rabbi Analia with us tonight. And without any further ado, let me pass the baton on to her and for her to kick us off with the first presentation.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And greetings from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem. Salam, peace unto you. Shalom to everyone. It's truly an honor to be here and to participate with all of you all over the world. I think it's a very important topic. I think it's a topic that really we all care about, especially because it's a topic in which, as we are going to see through the presentation and the presentations, is a topic that really has been in a globalized way, a way that the whole humanities has been united, and at the same time, everybody has been fighting in these different ways into what coronavirus has presented to each one of the countries. So I hope that we will be able to, I will be able to share the screen and to start the presentation. I hope that you can see that. 1 second. Well, okay, so let's see here. So we are talking about the religious celebrations during the planetary pestilence, and actually this is not the first time that we have a planetary pestilence. What is happening at this time is basically that we are fighting this pestilence as in a very globalized world. We did have the flu, what is called the Spanish flu, but actually it was not exactly Spanish, but in 1918, and we have even before that, we have plenty of pestilence throughout our history. What it did not happen is that we have been in such a world that has been so connected as we have in the 21st century as we have today. And because of that, the influence of these pestilences, of these pandemics that usually used to be endemics and now become pandemics, is because the connections that we have throughout the world. So what is happening with that, and what does Judaism said about that? One of the things that we have learned in this situation, just put a thumbs up if you can see the screen, at least the ones that I can see. Okay, good. So one of the things that we are going to see today is that the many of the situations that we have had in the past at least 9 months, in other places also for a whole year, is that we have been communicating in different ways, and we have been isolated ourselves in different ways. So technology, as we know, Personally, as I know, as a medical doctor and also as a rabbi, the technology can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. It depends on how we use that technology, if it is a blessing or if it is a curse. Also, technology is available to a certain amount of people and not to all the people. And so the society can be put together, the society can be polarized because of the technology that we have. But we have relied, as we can mention it today, that we are seeing, we are connected all over the world, just to come in different time zones, all together to this wonderful opportunity that the Open Mosque is opening for all of us. So the cartoons that they have put here are, you know, on the, at least on my left side, up left side, is that who called this meeting again? And it's basically these laptops, these computers that are all coming together, that is connecting to each one of us. And we are actually, I'm seeing on my screen people that I have not seen for a long time, that I have been connected in different ways. And it's beautiful that the Open Mosque have called this meeting together in order to put all these three religions to know that actually we have so much in common, and we have to celebrate our commonality and also to respect our differences. But here we come together to see how we are celebrating our commonalities, how we have celebrated our different religious aspects this past year. How was Easter celebrated? How was Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, how was celebrated? How was Ramadan celebrated or respected? How did the families come together when the screen is what really brought us together? How many people have been isolated? And so in this first slide, what I wanted to mention is that, you know, the computers could be very, very harsh and at the same time can put people together. And so in this second group is what we can mention that different religions and different worlds, we have all come together knowing that we have to connect ourselves by preserving life. And this past year, what it has shown us is what does it mean of the preservation of life. In Judaism, we have something that is called pikuach nefesh. And pikuach nefesh means how we preserve our life for the welfare of our being and the welfare of others. And so let's zoom, says here, and children and families, and how are you in the middle schools, and the grandchildren that cannot hug their grandparents, and the grandparents that can see and they have to adjust themselves in the 21st century with something called Zoom, with all this technology that was so strange to them and to their generation. But nevertheless, we have all made the effort in this past year, even to go beyond our ritual observance comfort zone. Like for instance, in the case of Judaism, many people do not use technology, for instance, on Shabbat or on the holidays. And nevertheless, many of us have gone out of our own comfort zone in order to connect people, in order to bring people together, in order to make everybody feel that we are part of an extended family. So our rabbis, in one of the greatest books that we have in our tradition, is called Pirkei Avot, which is the ethics of our fathers. And the question that we have is that how do we celebrate during this past year, God willing, when we are all vaccinated, hopefully in the next few months. For instance, here in Israel, over 500,000 people have already been vaccinated, and we are just bringing a sense of hope to what is happening ahead of us. The question is, how did people celebrate? And some people celebrate alone, but not lonely. Other people celebrate very lonely, and other people, because of technology, were able to connect with each other because of the balconies, because of singing together, because of playing tennis from one balcony to the other, because of those so many reasons that we have a way of connecting to each other, because we as human beings need to connect with each other. Our species is about connection. So Hillel, the elder, we are talking about the 1st century before the Common Era, or before Jesus. Hillel the elderly, who lived in Babylon and in Jerusalem during the 1st century, used to say, Al tifrosh min hatzibur, I'm going back, Al tifrosh min hatzibur, which means do not separate yourself from the community. In Judaism, in order to be able to fulfill all our prayers, we need community, at least a group of 10 adults that constitute a community. And the question that we have asked ourselves in these past 9 months, and for some people even more than that, is how do we create a community? Can we create a community through this technology? And many of us have created a community through technology, and many of us have reconnected to each other. So Hillel's statements emphasizes the role of interpersonal relationships in Jewish practice and in the humankind at large. Rather than Judaism providing us with ways to build community, community provides us with ways to be an integral part of our society. Here we are embracing each other, different religions, different backgrounds, different races. We are all together in this. An entire category of commandments outlines how we are to engage with other people, which is what we call in Hebrew, ben adam lechavero, one person to the other, this interconnection, this feeling of being a society that comes together. We call it, in order to become a community, a minimum group of community, a minyan, a person who is in mourning, for instance, that needs to remember someone, needs this minyan to, let me just approve someone here, in order to be able to fulfill the commandment of remembering someone. Even the commandments between an individual and God, which we call bein adam lemakom, often should and sometimes must be performed with others. We bring the presence of God in the sense of community by singing together, by bringing the voices of each other, by hearing the dissents of each other. There, where we call it the machloket, when we dissent with each other, when we bring the different voices, is there in which we find that presence of God, because we respect each other's voices. Our tradition has many beautiful practices for creating those deeper connections, like visiting the sick, providing meals to those in mourning, helping those in need, clothing the naked. Something happened here, I didn't do that. Well, somebody who is host is trying to, okay, good. So those traditions that are in order to serve the others, visiting the sick, providing meals to those in need, helping others, clothing the naked, claiming for justice, feeding the hungry. All those traditions are about coming with people together to serve other people, regardless of their houses of worship. Houses of worship have become centers of hospitality, and community have become gatherings to perform these mitzvot, these commandments. What we need is the centralization, but also is centrifugate and centripeted, basically from ourselves as a community, regardless if we are online or if we are in one house of worship. The idea is to bring out to the others. So the next important statement that I was thinking as preparing for this is, what did Corona or COVID-19 tell us? One of the things it's telling us is that we are not on the same boat, but we are all fighting the same storm. And I'm bringing this with a very, very deep relationship with this statement. When I heard at the very beginning, we are all on the same boat, the truth of the matter is that I did not feel that we were all on the same boat. I did feel that as a global community, this humankind, humanity in general, Bnei Adam, all of us, we are all fighting the same storm. But see, people came from different backgrounds, and the people came from different social economical stages and strategies. And so some people were able to have the opportunity to give each one of their children and grandchildren a computer to sit at home and to study. And some others did not have that possibility. So we were fighting, and we have been, and we are still fighting the same storm. Some countries are receiving more vaccines than other countries, and we will see that in the next coming months, in which we will see even more the difference accentuated between one country and the other. We are all fighting the same storm that is called COVID-19 or coronavirus, but we are not on the same boat. And we, as partners in humankind, we should think of the others who are in a different boat. We have to have access to those who are in the different boat in order to serve those communities, because it's important that we will get all together out of these difficult times. This is not the first pandemic. This is a text, part of a text that is taken from the Talmud. The Talmud basically are 63 tractates that are explaining the Mishnah and the Torah, basically the 5 books of Moses, that give us as Jewish people a way of understanding much later the Jewish law. And in the Talmud, in one of the tractates that is called Baba Kama, which means the first gate, in volume 60b, it says the rabbis advise that during a plague, we are talking about a text that is at least 1500 years old. So if the text is at least 1500 years old, it could be all the way until 2500 years old. So the rabbis advise that during a plague, one should stay at home, adding that the 4th century Babylonian Rabbi kept his windows shut during an epidemic. So he didn't go to sing at the balcony, he shut his windows. The Talmud goes on to advise that when traveling during an epidemic, one should stick to the sides of the road, basically put a mask and look to the other side, rather than to walk down the middle as on other times, assuming that the middle of the road was busier than its shoulders. That is not a bad advice, even if the logic given for it was that it is the angel of death who usually, please don't change my thing over here. If somebody is co-hosting and is touching your, okay. If anybody's co-hosting is touching your thing, okay, let me see. Okay, don't touch anything on your computer if you're co-hosting, please. Thank you. Okay, good. Here. So in the time of the Talmud, they thought that the angel of death could go in the middle of the road or could go in the side of the road. But basically what they are saying is that if there is a disease going on, and that there are different diseases, if there's a disease going on, as I said before, please don't touch your anything on your computer. I will appreciate that. Thank you. You can only do it if you're a co-host, but okay. Okay, let me see. If you are in the middle of a street and there are too many people over there, you might be contagious, or you can get contagious by other people. And because of that, the rabbis are saying, please go to the side of the road in order not to be contagious to anyone. So I'm going to just in place that, and please don't touch any computer. It's any of the hosts. I will appreciate that. Thank you. So what is happening here is the following. The rabbis decided that actually pestilence will happen and pandemics are happening. And we have lived through those pandemics, and this is not the first time, and it's not going to be the last time. How do we celebrate in the times of the pandemics? We try to celebrate into those moments in which we can create a community. We have to be very careful about what we call pikuach nefesh. Don't touch your computer. I will truly appreciate that, any of the other 5 people. Okay, and if you go into that time of the pandemic, if you go, you have to preserve yourself, but also you have to preserve the life of the others. Life is sacred and precious. Life is what really maintains us, and we in Judaism, we honor life. Death is something that happens after life, but we, our Torah, our Mishnah, our Talmud, our rabbis, during the Middle Ages, so we call the Parshanim, we are the ones who are sanctifying life. Every single day, we wake up in the morning and we say a prayer that says, Modeh ani lefanecha, melech hai v'kayam, shechezarta binishmati, v'chembla rabba emunatecha, which means I thank you, God, for giving me the opportunity to receive my body again. And by receiving my body, I'm receiving the precious gift that every single day God is giving us. So through pandemic and through this time in which we are in this luxury way of receiving the vaccine, me as a medical doctor that I'm very concentrated and focused on the welfare and the quality of life, and also as a rabbi that is in the connection between body and soul, the sense of thanking God every single day for the opportunity. We are praying for those who are sick. We're praying for those who are fighting these difficult moments. We are praying for those who are trying to have a better quality of life. We say the prayer that we say in our text that says, please God heal her, please God heal him, please God heal each one of us, our body and our souls, the opportunity to all of us to come together. So when we celebrate in our Jewish tradition, we have this incredible opportunity. We have been celebrated as humanity. We have been able to understand how we are all connected throughout this technology or throughout our technologies. But I do pray every single day that very soon the time will come and we will be able to hug each other again. Because at the end of the day, I'm Latino, so I love to hug people, to hug each other again, to be able to connect again, to be able to receive new opportunities, and to be able to go back to our houses of worship. Each one of our homes became a house of worship. I want the big house, this incredible universe, to become once again this house of worship. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Analia. I think that was a very interesting kickoff for our discussion tonight. You make a number of interesting points, and I'm sure that some of our attendees will be eager to comment or question you on that. Our next speaker, if you could just get out of your screen share, Rabbi Analia. Our next speaker is Professor Dan McVeigh from the University of Abilene Christian University in Texas. Professor McVeigh spent many years in Ghana and West Africa, where he encountered Islam firsthand, with especially northern Ghana, which is majority Muslim. And he is, of course, a Christian theologian and historian from the Baptist tradition. And he has developed a huge affinity and specialism in Christian Islamic dialogue and interfaith work. So we are very pleased and honored to have Professor Dan McVeigh to give the second presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Taj. It's an honor to be here. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get adjusted just a little bit here. There we go. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate this invitation as always, and I appreciate the rabbi's introductory comments and presentation. The Christian tradition has developed very largely in the context of Jewish scriptural foundational principles, and very widely the European historical and cultural context. So the expansion of the Christian faith, which is a key aspect, I guess we might say, of Christian tradition and history is expansion and spread to all the continents has introduced great diversity into church ritual and worship patterns and celebratory events and so forth. And this has made Christianity a very flexible and adaptable religion in many ways, a very absorbing type religion, as I'll talk about in just a moment. But what has emerged from this in worship patterns as well as ecclesiastical dynamics might be described in structural, doctrinal, as well as social terms. So it is a very flexible religious tradition that incorporates contextual symbolism into ritual cycles based on scriptural narratives. Well, I thought that would advance. That should have advanced. Let's see. Let me see what's going on here. There we go. The Hebrew concept of clean in religious ritual has impacted the Christian attention to the awareness of the interconnectedness of all things in all life and forms of life, and domestic order, communal safety and precaution, and the significance of the natural order. In our Christian tradition, Christian scriptures, of course, we rely very heavily upon Hebrew scripture and Hebrew tradition and traditional understanding. These categories of clean and unclean and ritual remedies for illness that are given in the Torah help to inspire curiosity to explore the natural world. Also, if we combine Hebrew and Greek scripture, that is Christian scripture in the Greek language, we find at least 127 references to the idea of plague or pestilence. So as the rabbi was saying, these are not new concepts or new ideas by any means. As a matter of fact, the word plague, the English word plague, comes from the Greek plege, which we find in the New Testament. Jesus himself is recorded in the gospel as speaking of plagues and famines and earthquakes as being understood as potential judgments by God. And these various instabilities of life and portents of judgment. The book of Revelation, the final book of Christian scripture in our canon, has the most references to plagues and pestilences, drawing on the symbolism of the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel in the apocalyptic style of religious symbolism, in which plagues are seen as judgments by God in his messages to humanity to wake up to the moral implications of human departure from the divine will. Psalm 91 from Hebrew scripture is a good example, I think, of social calamities falling upon God's people. And we might just take a brief reading from Psalm 91, which declares the sovereign providence of God. You who live in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, that is his wings, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, or the arrow that flies by day, or the pestilence that stalks in darkness, or the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near to you. Well, I think in the context of pestilence and plague and the falling of thousands and 10,000s, we can see that this text speaks very directly to trusting in God, trusting in his providence, and his ultimate accomplishment of his will. Looking at just a few historical examples, we find that there is a strong historical connection in Christian history between the Christian response to plagues and pestilence and the impact this had on the Christian community and the society at large. Many historians will look at these few examples I'll point at as being very significant. The Antonine smallpox pandemic, possibly a measles pandemic, usually understood to be smallpox, which occurred in the period of 165 to 180 of the Common Era in the Roman Empire, killed approximately 10 million people over 20 years. Emperor Marcus Aurelius blamed Christians for refusing to participate in Roman religious rituals. However, this period of pestilence, because of the Christian response, led to a vast expansion of the faith, drawing in thousands upon thousands of new converts. And what impacted, it seems, from both secular and Christian historians of the time, record keepers, what impacted the people to a large extent was seeing the Christian response to disease and chaos was not driven by fear, but rather a desire to serve and the lack of the fear of death. In other words, hope, having hope in death and the life after death. And this became, according to some historians, a contributing factor to Christianity supplanting the Roman pantheon during this period of time, or ultimately in the next couple of hundred years. There was also the pandemic of St. Cyprian's time, which will be 250 to 266, when Christians made up an estimated 2% of the Roman Empire's population. Such church leaders saw church leaders urging Christians to see the plague as an opportunity to really live the tenets of the faith. In Cyprian's work on mortality, he addressed this within the context of North African religious tensions. So again, it was a time of persecution for Christians in the Roman Empire, partially caused by the expansion, the rapid expansion of Christianity, and the inevitable conflict this brought with the Roman authorities. So again, during a time of pandemic, it was a time of growth for the Christian church, although it was not without controversy because of the persecution and the social changes taking place. The plague of Justinian in the 6th century was most likely a bubonic plague, which came from China, a bit ironic there, along the Silk Route. It killed an estimated 50 million people in the world at that time, devastating Persia before reaching Constantinople. The fear and dread of this disease consolidated imperial power and contributed to the different trajectories between the Church of the East and that of the West, according to some historians, in terms of ecclesiastical authority and some aspects of theology. The social chaos and isolation of the East probably contributed in some ways to these theological divides, although that's debatable and is worthy of much study. Scholars disagree as to its ultimate impact on the Christian faith, but it did see the theologians debate issues like God's wrath, the church's call to serve, and issues like quarantine, which of course comes from the later Italian phrase 40 giorni, or 40 days, and interrupted church rituals. So the impact of the plague during Justinian's time was not so much of an expansion of Christianity, but rather might have contributed to some division and separation of the Eastern and Western churches, as well as interrupting what might have been some very constructive development theologically during the time. It rather isolated because of quarantines that were implemented. And Justinian himself, of course, being a devout Christian, had his own understandings of what should be done. So there was a lot of interruption during this time. I'll not read all of this, but these are examples in later times. The Black Death of the 14th century, of course, was very devastating on the entire world. In Europe, there were 20 to 50 million deaths during a period of about 3 years. So it was absolutely devastating to the society. And mortality rates ranged from 20 to 90%, depending on the locale and the ability of certain people to escape. There was a lot of fear, a lot of despair. People were very afraid of dying alone. There were suspensions of sacramental services in the churches in Europe at the time. And by this time in the evolution of Christian practices and beliefs, this was a time in which the sacramental role of the church had come to be accepted, especially in the Western church, the Roman Catholic Church as we would normally think of it today, as being very necessary to receive forgiveness through a priest, and the last rites to be given to those who are dying. And this led to a lot of abandonment and isolation and family and communal breakdown. The question was this God's wrath? Was God punishing the world? Was God punishing the church? Was he punishing the local communities? It was as you can imagine, during a 3-year period, 1/3 of the world's population died. It's almost unimaginable what was taking place. And of course, what this led to was the rise of processions of hundreds of people grouping together, going from town to town in some form of religious penitence and display. This was sanctioned by Pope Clement VI himself. And of course, that spread the disease, people moving around from community to community. This then led to extreme forms of self-punishment and projections of fear and hatred onto the poor and the marginalized and so forth. Someone had to be to blame. Someone had to be blamed. And so priests often abandoned their posts or would charge exorbitant prices for their services. And there was a great backlash against the church. And this Some believe this contributed also to the rise of the Protestant Reformation. This plague continued breaking out over a period of the next 60 years or so, and it's referred to in a lot of European literature of the time. And it actually ended up proving to be a very debased time, as we often refer to it as an extension of the Dark Ages sometimes. The church was in a terrible condition in the Western world during this time in terms of morality and authenticity. This led to a lot of dissipation and lewdness on the part of the populace. Churches and key offices were besieged by maddened throngs at times. Ecclesiastical authorities would grow more distant and withdraw even more from the laity. So it was a very, very trying time for Christianity in Europe during the Black Death. But another one of the negatives that came from the Black Death time was the consolidation of the belief that among many Christians that Jews were the Antichrist, and thus an acceptable target of Christian venom. A very nasty, unfortunate outcome of this period. I'm not saying that it first arose during the Black Death, no, but it rather became consolidated and even more accepted to attack the Jews. And so the terrible pogroms and so forth were intensified. And we might even look into our more modern history and say that the Holocaust in European history might be connected quite directly to the attitudes that grew out of this very negative response to the plague and the pestilence of the time. If we apply that to the Protestant side, in 1527, the plague struck Wittenberg, and the home of Martin Luther, the great Protestant reformer, and he and his wife opened their home to the sick. Luther taught that Christians should pray for mercy and practice responsible sanitation and self-quarantine and appropriate medication and social distancing. In 1542, there was a terrible outbreak of the plague in Geneva, home to the Reformation movement of John Calvin. He, with his successor Theodore Beza, used their church-based institution of pastors to care for the sick, resulting in the deaths of many of the pastors who ventured out to the outskirts of the city to care for the banished ill, all the time quoting Jesus when he said, "I was sick and you visited me." Coming into more modern time, we find Charles Spurgeon, a very famous Baptist preacher in the UK in mid-19th century, came to London as a young 20-year-old pastor right at the time of a cholera outbreak in 1854. And this shaped his understanding of Scripture to a large extent, as he was at the New Park Street Chapel, beginning his ministry career. And this helped him, you might say, or he began to develop his understanding of the feeling of powerlessness in the face of natural catastrophe, and shaped his understanding of the purposes of human suffering in the will of God. And so he drew many lessons from this. And so these are just a few examples that by this historians speak of pandemics and stress the church's belief and capacities to serve positive social roles as it wrestles with the rebellious nature of humanity and the capriciousness of God's will, at least as these might be defined by the denominational creeds and theologies. The Roman Catholic tradition has tended to emphasize and rely upon the clergy and its mediation in sacramental processes as the best hope in times of social chaos. This contributes to the Mysterium Magnum, an intensification of the reliance on the mystery of the process of sanctification and spiritual safety within the church's intermediary role between God and humanity. Protestants have tended to rely more on their concepts of order in their structural views of nature and the relationship with the divine, even formulaic patterns of belief. Social chaos and calamity are seen as tests for humanity, preordained events or satanic attacks in some cases, in which God's glory and power are manifested through deliverance. And the church is taught again to accept its humble role as servant to the masses. Of course, these are all theoretical perspectives, while reality finds its own resting place among the lives and faith of believers within their own particular experiences and hopes. In other words, dealing with plague and pestilence has been part of Christian history, almost from the beginning, with Jesus himself speaking about plagues and famines and pestilences, and the New Testament scripture using this as symbolism of God's wrath and judgment upon those who would oppose his will in the world. And so we have interpretive questions. How do we interpret the presence of such plagues and pestilences? Are we intended to interpret? Are we supposed to try to sort of divine who is targeted, with this hurricane or this earthquake? Is it always connected in some way with a judgmental act of God? Or are these simply acts of nature that we must work our way through and remember our calling as Christians in Christ to love and to serve and to leave the bigger questions to God, so to speak. So I'm just trying to give a few historical examples of different approaches and the fact that it has, plague and pestilence have had significant impact on Christian development of thought and theology. More recently, the Spanish flu of 1918 saw perhaps as many as 500 million cases around the world. This was interpreted by Christians in different ways. One pastor, I read his report on it, he even said that the Spanish flu was God's message that he could devastate the world even more than humans had in the First World War. It's a very odd way to look at it, I think. But other clergy during the early 20th century focused on health and scientific solutions via hygiene, and again, serving the people, serving the ill, the establishment of hospitals. And so it's mixed in with Christian development, historical development as well. There's one reference here to historian Lawrence Spinney, who sees that the Spanish flu assisted the establishment of apartheid in South Africa. Interesting concept, when the whites blamed blacks for introducing and spreading the disease, contrary to all historical and current indications, even of that time. The Ebola crisis in Liberia in 2014 was a Christian hospital in Monrovia. The Evangelical Lutheran West African mission there became ground zero. Dr. Kent Brantley, who is a graduate of the university where I teach, he and his wife both, was serving in a Christian hospital there at the center of that outbreak. He became ill and survived Ebola. His blood is now used for serum research and vaccination research. He and his wife Amber are now in Zambia working at another Christian hospital. So these experiences are quite common, Christian tradition. Theologically, Christianity has always been founded upon the concepts of substitution, corresponding type and antitype, representation, symbolism, etc. So there's a great ecclesiastical flexibility in times of crisis. The evolution of Christian orthodoxy and orthopraxy in the pre-modern Enlightenment and modern eras has allowed for translatability and so forth. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, the Christian tradition is quite flexible. So the impact of COVID upon the religious calendar, for example, it varies widely according to the denomination, according to the tradition. Some churches are very high church, very structured, and thus the COVID has interrupted with their practices and their meetings quite extensively. Others are low church, we call them sometimes, less focused on the structured approaches. So the biblical text itself, I would argue, provides very little by way of universally expected ritual for Christians. Baptism is referred to, the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper is referred to, and communal gatherings for worship and reading, song, and prayer. But the actual practice of religious holidays, Advent, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, All Souls Day, etc., these represent a varying degree of syncretistic development of Christian rituals, blended with cultural and pre-existing religious calendars and rituals, especially in the European context. So Christian scripture does not establish any particular calendar for these celebrations, with Easter perhaps being an exception because it is connected to the Jewish Passover. Thus, we find varying dates for significant holy seasons, and in some denominations, a high emphasis on the religious calendar. In other denominations, a very low emphasis on the religious calendar. So there's a lot of flexibility within Christian traditions. As I begin to close, the impact of the virus has been huge. Restrictions in church attendance, losses to church coffers, that is, no cash offerings, especially now in most churches, restrictions in church public rituals due to limitations on public gatherings, reduction in church staff, limited budgets, restrictions in pilgrimages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Christian religion relies on the religio concept, linking individual with God and with others. So as community is established and maintained through worship, ritual, festival, etc., this has had a big impact on Christianity. Attendance restrictions and public restrictions in movement have, of course, brought a new normal for churches. As the rabbi was talking about, finding new ways to connect digitally and otherwise. So there's a great creativity that can be found, but there are also problems that go along with that as well. The hybridization of worship formats, public trust issues due to divided political allegiances. In the United States in particular, we have issues with certain branches of Christianity associating with certain political parties, et cetera, et cetera. And so the political issues become religious issues become political issues, as we've just come through our election season. A couple of studies I consulted, a study in Poland shows that churches generally do their own research and adjustment in addition to government guidelines. But there are differences in how the Catholic and Protestant responses have been. Protestants tend to close down their churches more than the Roman Catholic churches do. But there are similar approaches in studying it, analyzing it, trying to follow government guidelines. Churches have been major sources of the COVID infection. One church in Oregon in the United States has started meeting again on May 22nd, and by July 9th had directly and indirectly caused 356 infections. One big example stands out. The Shincheonji Church of Jesus in South Korea has 240,000 members in one church, one congregation. They resisted the government guidelines to close down, and in February, beginning in a 2-week period, the cases in South Korea, the entire country, jumped from 31 to 6,767 in 2 weeks. 64% of those cases came from that one church. Eventually, the church was forced to close down and was fined very heavily, $82 million. And so cases go on and on. And so church activities, weddings, funerals have been the source of many infections and the spread of the disease. So let me briefly get to this last point here. The resistance to government restrictions are often on the basis of exceptionalism of faith and believers, the importance of serving God in divine ritual above all else. Some churches say, no, government cannot tell us what to do. Worshiping God is more important than anything. Other churches, they're able to do the principle of substitution and sacramental rituals, aided by their church authorities and priests and ministers, and they adapt and deal with the situation as it is. The concept of covenant is very important for Christians, as we have a covenant with God and with one another, to accept responsibility and to avoid the hyper-individualization that seems to be plaguing much of the Western world. COVID-19 has proven to be either a time for communal cooperation and ecumenical unity, or it has been politicized, creating polarizing positions on issues of public safety versus individual choice, state authority versus freedom of religion and speech. This is, of course, primarily speaking in the American concept or context. And these rivalries are often born on the backs of other long-standing historical and cultural dynamics. So many scholars believe that Christianity is in the midst of another 500-year major reformative period. What is going to be the impact of COVID-19 in the long term, we will wait to see. But we do rely upon God's guidance in the cycles of order and disorder and reorder for the centering of our faith, the recentering of our faith, and finding the eternal centers of gravity of our faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dan McVeigh, for a rather interesting and illuminating historical overview of pestilence and pandemics in the Christian calendar throughout the ages. So I think, again, there will be a number of questions regarding that. Now we come to our third speaker, who is a remarkable young Muslim scholar from Pretoria. He and others founded the very liberal and progressive mosque in Pretoria, South Africa, called the Al-Asr Mosque. He is an accountant by training and runs a very successful accountancy firm, but he's also a scholar of Quranic studies and has quite an amazing breadth and depth of knowledge of the faith and its scripture. So it's given great pleasure to call upon Imam Osman Musa to deliver the Islamic perspective on this topic.
Thank you, Taj, Dr. Taj. Peace and blessings upon everyone tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a bit technologically challenged, but I'm going to try and get my screen to share. I see that's good. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
Okay. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Once again, Dr. Taj, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it's extremely important for the religious community around the world to engage on this topic and see from a religious perspective. We must understand that religion offers people a spiritual connection to God. It soothes the mind. It does good for people, etc. And religion in that sense is extremely important. What religion can also do is become what's known in many circles as the opium of the people, and can lead to destruction due to its adherents not understanding the religion itself and relying on others and mere indoctrination. So that's a real challenge that exists within religions, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc. So what I'd like to deal with today is some of the underlying principles that people of faith should have a look at in their own religions, and then look at it from an Islamic perspective, look at some of the responses of various communities within Islam. I don't think any religion per se constitutes of a homogeneous group of people. Within Christianity, you'll have Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity, Protestants and Catholics. Within Judaism, you've got your own sects, and within Islam as well, you've got your own sects as well. And I think that's really an undeniable fact. What religions or the religious leaders need to do, and I think, in fact, I think this is the responsibility that lies on the shoulders of every person belonging to a religion. Now, earlier when you referred to me as an imam, I'm really an ordinary guy, right? I'm an accountant by training. I study the Quran on my own with a group of people. I don't give fatwas. We don't give fatwas. What we do, we sit down, we discuss issues, and it's through this principle of mutual consultation we come up with the way we think the religious response should be on any particular issue. So it's rather unconventional, but we believe that from the Quranic perspective, this is the right thing to do. I'll deal with that a little more during my presentation. What I've also taken the liberty to do is to add something to the title you've given me, is COVID-19, the pandemic that gave worshippers an opportunity to bring reason back to religion. Now, I think generally among religion, the risk of people avoiding reason and thinking that religion is something that you have blind faith and that God requires blind faith needs to be really dealt with by all religions, and something I'll endeavor to do in my presentation as well. But introducing Islam in a few words, and this is from my perspective, so I speak with no real authority. You don't need to believe anything I say. Whatever I say to you, I'm going to give you a verse of the Quran to refer to, and I'm going to tell you briefly about the importance of the Quran as well. So I would rather have you look at the presentation and see whether it makes sense to you, whether it's Quranically justified, and make up your own mind whether you agree or disagree with what I say. So please, I'm not going to recite any of my credentials for you to believe what I say, because I have none. What I'd like to do is to refer to the divine text. So introducing Islam in a few words. One, to create a just social order where human beings deal with each other on the basis of fairness. And this is in a chapter of the Quran called Surah Hadid, the ayah, Surah 57, verse 25. And in that verse, God tells us the purpose of Him sending revelation throughout the ages, from the time of Adam to Muhammad, peace be upon him, which includes Jesus, Moses, etc. And the idea or the purpose behind this was to create a just social order. The second thing was, from my understanding, is the preservation of human life is a top priority for any person of faith. And the reason why I say that, if you look at another chapter of the Quran, Surah 5, verse 35, and I don't really need to give you a lot on this because this is contained in the Torah as well. And it says, if you save the life of a human being, it's as though you save the life of humanity. And it's a cardinal, it's a fundamental principle across all religions, and emphasized in the Torah and re-emphasized in the Quran, bringing the safety of human life as a top priority among religions. So in other words, it's really, uh, taking the social aspects of life and giving it a priority, a higher priority in uh, religion. The third one is the maintaining of human dignity. God says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the sons of Adam. So as human beings, we need to maintain or preserve that human dignity given to us by God. And the third thing is obviously in Islam, and I think all religions as well, is they are uncompromisingly Unitarian, the oneness of God. So all religions point towards the oneness of God. I know there's some issues in Christianity, but when you listen to what the Christians have to say, even they acknowledge the oneness of God. So the Tawheed, the oneness of God, is again across all religions. What Islam does is that it takes this concept of the oneness of God and puts it into your social life. So it says to you, you cannot have a social life that's devoid of good values and subscribe to the oneness of God. If you subscribe to the oneness of God, it has to be tied in with good social values, right? And observing the divine commandments. And I'll deal with that a little later, but those of you who've got access to a Quran, just read those stories of the prior prophets before Muhammad mentioned in the Quran, the Thamud, the Ad, etc. And every time God mentions those stories, he talks about the oneness of God and the social misgivings of those people. And God ties these two together. It's never just the oneness of God. So there's no separation between what is socially correct and what is spiritually correct in Islam. It has to tie together. The source of Islamic law, and this could be a bit controversial in some circles, but I think from the Quran it's quite clear. One is, from my perspective, is the divine text left to us by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. What we need to understand is that at the time of the death of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, what was left behind was the Quran alone as a source of guidance for the believing community. And number two was obviously the mind of the human being. Now, why do I say the mind of the human being? Because the Quran refers to the mind of the human being frequently. I'll just give you two references. In chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, and it's a story of Joseph, where God says, Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Kitab al Mubin. These are the verses of a book that makes things clear. We reveal to you the Quran in an Arabic language, talking to Muhammad, لَعَلَّكُمْ, in order that you, your direct community, may reflect upon it. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Now, those who are familiar with a bit of Arabic will know that the word aql refers to the mind. So God says you may grasp this message with your mind. And repeatedly, God challenges the believers, the society who receive the Quran, to apply their minds to it and look at the various lessons and signs given to them by God in the Holy Book, to reflect upon it, to challenge it, and see if they can, if it doesn't appeal to their mind. So it was never forced down anyone's throats. It was just challenging their minds all along, and if they accepted it through their, applying their minds to it, then so be it. It was good. If they didn't accept it, well, they had the freedom to reject the message as well, and they weren't harmed the least. The divine text gives both specific and broad guidelines and allows the human being much freedom to formulate laws and regulations for social cohesion, law and order. Now, many a time you'll hear that Muslims say, and religionists say, that God has prescribed everything for us, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go and sleep. From an Islamic perspective, it's just not true. God hasn't done that for Muslims. He's allowed the adherents of the Quran a lot of freedom to move. In other words, to apply their minds to what they think is best for a situation. He's given them certain rules. He's given them the framework within which to operate, and allowed them a lot of freedom or latitude to move within these rules to make their lives easier. So an example is the time to break one's fast. Normally we just say sunset, right? That you break your fast. But and fasting is a cardinal principle in Islam during Ramadan. But the Quran actually does not give you a time to break your fast. It says until nightfall. So when nightfall, until night, but nightfall is the earliest, so you can extend your fast if you wish. So the minimum time is given to you in the Quran. What traditionalists have done is that in order to try and regulate this, they've put in certain times. And we took that on as Islam, unfortunately, forgetting that God didn't say any of this. So there's no reason why you've got to rush home at 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon during winter to go and break your fast and cause accidents on the road. No, God has given you that freedom. And likewise with prayer as well. I'll deal with that very briefly now. So Islam, or at least the Quran, does not seek to regulate every facet of one's spiritual, personal, and social life. Uh, the source of Islamic law continued. In fact, if you study the Quran, more of the Quran is focused on social life, the law of inheritance. There are more verses on the law of inheritance than on prayer, in terms of how to pray. The laws pertaining to murder, to treason, to theft, to marriage and divorce, and to financial matters are much more in the Quran, and there is much less on prayer compared to these. Now, and I would challenge anybody to go to the Quran. You will find the word prayer, salat, occurring more than 80 times, but you would find very little, in fact, nothing on how to stand, how to bow, and giving you those minutiae. What the Quran seeks to build is an outcomes-based prayer. Now, I'll deal with that a little further. The reason that the Quran does not separate what is spiritual from what is social is because it connects prayer to social justice. It does not separate the two. So this is the approach of the Quran, and this is Islam. It's not supposed to separate the two. If you take an example in chapter 11, verse 87, this is Prophet Shu'aib talking, right? And I'm sure all of you are familiar with Islam, know this concept, or heard the word salah, or prayer, and that's the 5 daily prayers that are fundamental to Islam. Now, if you stick at chapter 11, verse 87, it says, the people tell Shu'aib, does your prayer, does your salat, this is the exact Arabic word that we do 5 times a day, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the Muslim world do this mechanically and ritually. But what the Quran sets out is that your prayer commands you that you leave off the worship which our fathers practice, or that we leave off doing what we like with our property. In other words, the prayer in Islam is meant to regulate one's social and religious affairs, to live within the confines of the law. And that is what the prayer is directed towards, and seeks to achieve that as an outcome, rather than how many times have you bowed, how many times have you prostrated. Now, the challenges brought about by the pandemic to religionists. Human beings are social beings. We have a natural instinct to interact. However, when there's a heavy tornado, we stay in our homes, probably underground too. So we have this requirement for safety as well, and that's also natural. When we consider that the Quran says that, and if one saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of the whole people. Now, this is in the Torah as well. And that all Abrahamic faiths endorse this principle, then it boggles the mind why adherents of these faiths should have any difficulty with taking their prayers and services online. This is whether you Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jew, this is a fundamental principle of religion, and therefore there should be no difficulty, there should be no discussion as well about the need to practice physical distancing. What the reaction showed through many religious circles, and you can just Google online and you'll see religious gatherings. In fact, this afternoon I had visits from certain Muslims who go home to home, and they wanted to enter my home to come and remind me to go and pray. I had to explain to them, look guys, it's coronavirus, and what you people are causing could be death, etc. And I just hope it sank in. I think it did, because they didn't visit my neighbor after that. But I kept a safe social distance. I kept them outside, and I explained to them, and I said I could either turn them away or I could explain to them. And I chose the path of explaining to them, because people are brainwashed into believing that if you die in this as a religionist, then there's some sort of holiness in your death. And if you cause someone else's death, then it's holiness for that person as well. And when I quoted these verses that I'm quoting here tonight, I think the people who visited me had a very different idea of what their responsibilities now are. Okay, so the pandemic is caused, this pandemic has caused in some circles among religionists COVID denial, despite the vast number of cases, etc. And I think all this fatigue of social distancing, etc., is causing COVID denial in the religious communities. And many, unfortunately, have been spending more time on conspiracy theories instead of warning people of the imminent dangers. Now, what is the root cause of this? And I think the root cause of this is that religion, to some degree, has taken out, to a large degree, has created or has made an enemy with science. And you find religion and science, or religion and reason, are almost on competing scales and are sort of irreconcilable, right? So what does Islam have to say about that? And I'll deal with that a little later. But what opportunities does the pandemic give to religionists or to people of a faith? When I examine the text of the Quran from from an Islamic perspective, it is quite clear that God has not told us to stand shoulder to shoulder. So I heard the rabbi speak, and there's 10 people as a minimum required to form a sort of congregation or a gathering. And among traditional Muslim society, we have something very similar as well, that it was now, I think, brought down to 3 during with COVID, where you've got to physically stand and form what we call a Jamaat. But the Quran doesn't specify any of this. So it doesn't tell us how many people qualify to form a gathering. It doesn't tell us whether a gathering should be physical. So it allows a lot of flexibility, right? And remember, it's speaking to a people 1400 years ago who rode camels, who rode horses, who used swords, who used bow and arrows, etc., who used gold as a medium of exchange, and it addresses them in terms that were relevant to them at the time. So it doesn't give you a count of number, etc. The Quran is not strictly specified details of physical postures too. The words used for these postures, like ruku and sujood, have meanings of divine compliance and humility as well. So the Quran is giving us a very dynamic understanding of what religion should be. What God has made emphatically clear is the mindset, the God consciousness, and mental grasping of the content of the prayer that should be present in prayer. The prayer is not meant to the prayer is meant to emphasize and remind people of the divine instructions. So from the Quranic perspective, it's function over form. And here's a beautiful example from a verse in the Quran. God curses those who pray, right? But he curses a certain type of person who prays. So woe to the worshippers who are unmindful of their prayers, those who want to be seen of men but refuse to supply neighborly needs. Now, what is a neighborly need? A neighborly need during COVID would be to keep a safe physical distance. It's a neighborly need. I need to be at a distance from my neighbor. I can't be too close because I could be infecting him. And God is saying, the type of person who's inconsiderate to those type of things, my curse is on such a type of a person. During times like these, one gets to appreciate the difference between religion and culture. And I use the term religion advisedly. I've looked at the definitions of the word religion. It's very different to a cult. A religion is observing a higher authority, right? And those instructions are given to us for Muslims in the Quran. And it's very different to culture, where culture comes and says you've got to be 40 people or 30 people and you've got to touch each other during prayer, etc. None of those are mentioned in the Quran. It's not even remotely mentioned in the Quran at all. So if we had to live by the divine book, it would be a seamless transition to move towards a virtual platform. Why? Number one, because the divine book has not outlawed it. Number two, the divine book has not prescribed the distancing between each other and how the arrangement should take place for prayer to be performed. Number three, the divine book is science and technology friendly. So Islam endorses science. I want to read to you something from Al Jazeera in the year 1025. This is how Islam was, and it's actually, it's quite sad to see today where we've ended up. This is talking about Avicenna. Avicenna, who was a famous medical scholar and philosopher of his time, and they point out how the very idea of quarantine is rooted in the scientific work of Avicenna, who had argued for controlling the spread of diseases in his 5-volume medical encyclopedia, the Qanun in Arabic, it's called the Canon in English, of medicine, originally published in 1025, and there's a reference there to Al Jazeera, you can look it up. So this is quite interesting that it was the Muslim philosophers who endorsed science, who embraced science, and who never seen science and reasoning as the antithesis or the enemy of religion. It was all incorporated as part of religion or deen or Islam. Unfortunately, Muslims, many Muslims in today's day and age have abandoned that type of thinking. Right, let's move on. Just a quick slide. I thought I'll just give you a quick difference in traditional approach versus Quranic centric approach during the pandemic. And the traditional approach is what, as I said earlier, is a cultural integration of ideas into religion. So if you look on the left-hand side, it's the traditional approach. So we've got 5 daily prayers in Islam. There's the emotional blackmail to gather. And if you don't gather, it's said, you'll lose your rewards, etc. God won't be happy. Others, so the response was some prayed at home by themselves, and others simply broke the rules and gathered. In the UK, in India, in South Africa, everywhere, people gathered, and when people gathered, it led to spreading of the virus to extremely high levels, right? The Quran-centric response was quite simple. There are many platforms like Zoom, Mixler. So what we did, for example, as soon as lockdown was announced, in fact, before lockdown was announced, the spread was, the dangers of corona were well known, and we said we're going virtually. The Imam who leads the prayer will basically send out an invite on a platform called Mixler, and everyone would get every single prayer online. Initially, people were hesitant. I can tell you, people felt this need to connect to the mosque, and it took off in our area, I think, brilliantly. During Ramadan, we had this as well. We had people from abroad joining as well. So it took off extremely well. Even Friday prayers, the entire program was broadcasted from the first day of lockdown. The Friday prayers were online, a full program, as you would have in a mosque. You would miss nothing. You would have your family praying next to you in your home. All you need is a phone or a computer with internet connectivity. Funeral prayers. Now, at the time of a funeral, this is where families need support and consoling. Dr. Taj, if I'm exceeding my time, please just raise your hand and show me the red card.
Yeah, 5 minutes, Imam Osman.
Okay. All right. So the funeral prayers are something that is widely attended by the community, and it's for consoling and encouraging the family. You can well imagine what happened during COVID. The numbers were restricted for funeral attendance. People couldn't go visit. There wasn't proper closure, etc. And it was extremely difficult. And the traditional mindset could do virtually nothing about this because you need to be physically there, and you need to perform the prayers physically present. What do? We simply offered this online, and whoever wanted their families to join the prayer, we had our imams make the prayer virtually, and people could join. We delivered a talk to console the families and encourage them during this process and give them some strength, and it worked extremely well. Our group received many messages, or thanking us for this simple little intervention. And of course, Eid is a big thing for us. It's a celebration after a month-long fasting program. You want to gather with your family. There was lockdown and you couldn't. How do you celebrate? A big thing is Eid. The Eid program starts with some hymns, etc. All that was absent and missing in our lives. Once again, we simply used the virtual platform. It was, I think, it was probably the largest Eid gathering in that you could have in South Africa. Because if you had 200 to 300 people online, you had their families, you had more than 1,000 people probably attending. Our estimate, whatever it is that we offered this facility, delivered the lecture, gave a Quran-centric view, and it was seamless. So again, the entire program was done online. The learnings through COVID. One, COVID brought the realization that God is not restricted to a mosque, temple, church, or synagogue. People behaved as though God is shut out of our lives. They in fact, what they exposed was that they believed that God lives in those four walls only, of bricks and mortar. Religion means, or deen, or from an Islamic perspective, means that you express your subservience to God through the way you live, and therefore one cannot be saddened by the closure of a mosque. Religion was not abandoned. The mosques had to be closed for a while. As a faith-based community, we must adapt to the changing environment to make God relevant and not confine him to bricks and mortar. That religion is not the mere mechanical postures or hymns praising God either on a Friday or on a Sunday or on a Saturday, but instead is reflected in our social conduct through being mindful to our fellow man. I quoted this verse, I won't quote it again. So what is the response from the believing community? We should spend less time fighting about our rights to open the mosque, right? In fact, we should spend no time on that. And we should take all of that energy and direct it towards making sure that the very best care is given to the less fortunate. Now is the time where the vaccine is going to come. Is this going to be available? For example, in South Africa, there's lots and lots of poor people. How long is it going to take to get to the wider community in South Africa? Religionists, every adherent of religion should be concerned with this the most. That how can I make the life of the less fortunate, a bit easier? Lastly, that religion cannot be divorced from the mind. Reason needs to be firmly entrenched as part of our religious doctrine. And here the Quran says, do they not earnestly seek to understand the Quran, or are their hearts or minds locked up by them? We cannot be the persecutors of scientists, but rather the enablers of science and technology. And here again, the Quran sends several verses to us, or sets out several verses dealing with technology. Okay, then Taj, just one last thing. I'm done with my presentation. There's some issue that's come up about congratulating people of other faiths in their religious festivities. I just noticed some messages going around prohibiting this. Can I spend a minute on this, or would you like me to
please,
conclude?
Time is tight, but go ahead quickly.
Yeah, okay, so number one, so just to set the record straight, Surah 60 verse 8, God tells us, Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of your religion, and do not expel you from your homes, from dealing kindly and justly with them. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly, right? And when a greeting is offered to you, right, and note, it's not just when a Muslim offers you a greeting. When anyone offers you a greeting, greet in return with one that is better, and return it in a like manner at least. In other words, the Quran is encouraging greetings and well-wishing to other people, right? And then it says, and speak to the people good words, in chapter 2, verse 83. And do not converse with the people of the scripture except in a way that is best. So, in other words, what the Quran is setting out for us is that as a believing community, as Muslims, right, we afford people their right to believe or to disbelieve. And there's a special place in the hearts of Muslims for the people of the book. There's a special category given in the Quran, and therefore what we see in the Quran is absolutely no prohibition against congratulating followers of other religions upon their days of religious festival. To the contrary, based on the above verses, Muslims have an obligation to protect the places of other worship, be respectful, kind, and friendly to them, and allow them the religious freedom to practice their religion. Okay, Taj, I'm done. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I haven't exceeded my time by too much.
Okay, thank you, Imam Usman Musa. I think you've presented a very thorough picture of Islam, and hopefully there will be people, especially those who are not Muslim, who wish to quiz you about some aspects of your presentation. Our last and final speaker is Bishop Rushadan from Tbilisi in Georgia. He's a bishop in the Evangelical Church, Baptist Church of Georgia, and she's the first female bishop in that country, and she has made a name for herself not only in her native Georgia, where she's been recognized by the president of the country, but also internationally. She was invited by Michelle Obama and President Obama to accept an award at the White House. So she's quite well known. So it's been a great pleasure to invite Bishop Rushadan to be our last speaker.
Um, Good evening, everybody. May I share my screen?
Yeah, you got you have a you are a co-host, aren't you?
Yeah, but there is,
Go ahead.
yeah,
You need to from your end. Yeah, there you go.
yeah, here I am.
Mm.
So good evening, everybody. It's almost midnight in Tbilisi, and within 24 hours, we will be celebrating New Year 2021. So we're kind of in anticipation of this wonderful day. Um, when I was listening to those wonderful presentations and when I was thinking about my own presentation, the very first thing I started to think about is a very famous villain character, Grinch, who did steal the Christmas for the children. So during 2020, this villain was COVID, who stole Easter for us, who stole Passover for Jewish community, and so a lot of celebrations that has been taken away from us. So there has been a lot of discussions how to deal with it, how to live in the situation. Are we kind of surrendering to COVID, giving up our traditions, giving up our celebrations, giving up what is very important for the religious communities? And I'm not sure that the experience of country of Georgia is very much different from your experiences, but I can tell what was happening during this year in my country. So it was kind of apocalyptic understanding of the situation, so that God is punishing all of us. Another dimension of the situation was measuring who is better faithful to God, who has more truth, so who is obeying God better than the others. So that really brought a very important topic on the surface. What is more important? What is the most important thing? So back to Grinch. What Grinch did was he stole the presents of everybody who lived in this little town. And everybody thought that the Christmas was gone because the presents were gone. So somehow we are in the same situation like the residents of this little town. So if the things what we think are important are gone, or we cannot fulfill, we cannot participate in, we think that the major and the most important things are gone too. So my presentation is less academic, is kind of more playing with charts. So I would just I just want to give you a brief overview of the liturgical calendar of Christianity, not on the denominational from the denominational perspective, but a little bit from the historical perspective as well. My church was doing interfaith calendar for 2021, so I was very much involved in this process for the last 2 months. So it was very interesting to observe, just as Dr. McVeigh mentioned, that it's so diverse how Christian denominations celebrate different festivals. So some would celebrate hundreds of festivals, and they would say that every and each festival is very important, the most important thing, and some would not celebrate even one, and the most important thing is just to appear in the church building once in a week and pray together and sing together and share the space together. So the most important festival, probably the holiest day for the Christian believers, would be Easter. And Easter is not just one day event. It's there is a group of festivals attached to Easter. Of course, it's something that precedes Easter. It's Lent time, and there are diverse experiences. Some would start Lent 40 days ahead with the Ash Wednesday, or 44 days ahead with the forgiveness day of asking of forgiveness. Then comes the very special Holy Week, which starts with the Palm Sunday, then comes the Maundy Thursday, then Good Friday, and of course the Easter celebration. Then some celebrations that are attached to Easter after the celebration, which is Ascension Day, 40 days after Easter, and Pentecost, 50 days after Easter. So it looks quite ordered, though it's not that easy to follow. For instance, it's not the universal thing, and it's not something, though it has roots in the New Testament, and something that can be traced back to the from the apostles. But there has been a lot of discussions when or how to celebrate Easter. So one of the major decisions on the very first Church Council on 322 in Nicaea was a decision, the creed, that the Easter has to be celebrated on Nisan 14th, the very first Sunday, not any any weekday that can fall on the 14th day, but the very first Sunday. So it looked like, so it was settled, but not really, because today we have denominations who follow the Julian calendar or Gregorian calendar, and sometimes they would coincide, sometimes difference would be 2, 3, even a month difference between the dates. So it's rather confusing to see the members of the same family celebrating the same events in different times, in different situations. The second biggest festival probably would be of course, Christmas. And that's even more chaotic because it was not until the 3rd century when Christians started to think about Christmas as a festival, because the early Christians thought that the opponents would be very ironic about celebrating the birth of Jesus, as the pagans would celebrate their saints' birthdays. They would say that the most important date of martyr's life is the day of death, not the day when one was born. So it has not been celebrated or defined until the 3rd century. And it's very interesting how the decision or calculations was made. So December 25th falls on the date of winter solstice, when the day starts to grow after the longest night of the year. So it's very significant. The Christmas has always been connected with the symbol of light. In the pre-Christian tradition, it would be the celebration of the rebirth of unconquered sun. So it was very significant decision to connect the date to the pre-Christian tradition when the day is starting to grow. So the Christmas is preceded by Lent. Very, very recent tradition is the Advent tradition, lighting 4 candles, 1 candle every week. So it's kind of getting into preparation. Our church has a tradition to dedicate each Sunday, each week to certain topics, certain problems, certain issues. For instance, this year one was charity, another was diversity, justice, and forgot the fourth one. Okay. And then the Christmas comes, and then we celebrate it. But even that is not very settled. For instance, in tiny Georgia, where inhabitants are 3.5 million people, we have 3 Christmases. One is December 25th, another is January the 6th, and the January the 7th. And when we speak about the dates, it's very much, there was a discussion how religion can be very political. And in our country, in our experience, religion is always political, and not sometimes. And the debates and discussions are all about power and all about the politics. So this charter that shows what kind of celebrations we have as Christians, how diverse we can be. And all of a sudden, when the lockdown happened in March 2020, very close to the Easter celebration, the debate started, what shall we do? Can we obey godless government or obey God's word to be together, to celebrate important celebrations? So our church made a very unpopular decision. We closed down the services for the congregation. We went online. Only the ministers would go to church, and we had the saddest Easter celebration ever, because we were not very good with the modern technologies and media things, so we were not prepared. It was very soon after the lockdown happened, so it was very heartbreaking Easter celebration in 2020. And we prayed that the Christmas would be better and different and more traditional, as we are accustomed to. But unfortunately, COVID is still there, and we had more prepared, very nice, very beautiful, but still online is Christmas celebration. That was a very challenging year for us as Christians, and to see how we deal with important and less important things. But probably if we kind of not to look at the festivals or liturgical calendar of the whole year, but rather zoom in and smaller time frames, probably the most important things are not the celebrations that happen twice a year, but something that is starting from the law of Moses, from the when we speak in Leviticus, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed feast of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. They are my appointed feast. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day in Shabbat of solemn rest, a holy convocation." So the Shabbat day, which is translated in Christian tradition, the Sunday, there's something that happens more frequently than Easter or Christmas celebration. That was also altered, so we could not come together as frequently as we used to, and as often and in a form we were accustomed to. And when we think about Shabbat, probably what we Christians learned from Jesus about this special day is what we read in Mark, Gospel of Mark, when one Shabbat day, Jesus and his disciples were walking in a grain field, and they were probably hungry, and the disciples started to cut the heads of the grains and eat them. So it was considered as work, and they broke Shabbat. And Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on Shabbat?" And Jesus is saying, the Shabbat was made for men, not men for the Shabbat. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Shabbat. And this is a very important message to think about more and less important things. So to line up everything what we do and put them according their importance. So probably the most important thing is the center of everything is our neighbor, or is human being, to care about people, to care about humans. I liked the example of Imam Osman when he said that if there is a hurricane or what do? We don't run out, so we hide in the basement. The same happened with COVID. So unfortunately, some of us decided to put Shabbat in front and put the interests or health or lives of our neighbors, of our loved ones, on the second place. And we kind of ran out in the streets when the storm came. So what did we do when there were how we deal with common services? Okay, we can sing together online, we can pray together online. By the way, the usage of modern technologies, medias, it was started much earlier than COVID came to the world. For instance, confessions or praying together. We have an elderly lady in our church who is in the bed for the last 20 years now, but she's a very active minister. And what she does is she can only hold a phone, and the only thing she can move is her thumb, and she can dial a phone number. So she can call and talk to people who need her support and pray together with them. So if I need the prayerful support, she's the first one to call and ask for prayers. So these are the medias that can be very powerfully used, and we cannot. It's not something artificial, or artificial can be being together in the same space, and very genuine relationships can be in distance. So you can listen to sermon online. You can do a lot of things online. One of the things which we found very difficult was funeral issues. You can postpone baptism, for instance, for 2 or 3 months, so they can wait. But what can we do when somebody dies? What can we do when family needs support? So that was a time when we decided to go to the family, to be with the family. Although we followed the regulations and followed the Shabbat rules, but still we decided to be with the family. But what is happening with things like Eucharist, when you really need to be together to celebrate Eucharist, to give bread, to pass the cup of wine? So when we were discussing about the issues in ecumenical environment, some of the bishops from different denominations, they said, oh, that's unspeakable. That's only in Europe they discussed that people can celebrate Eucharist online. So that there was a discussion so that everybody who wants to participate in the Eucharist can bring their own wine and their own bread in front of the screen, pray together. The priest can pray for the wine and bread, and everybody can participate. Some of my colleagues from different churches, they said, no, that's blasphemy. You cannot simplify the sacraments that much. It's a kind of narrowing down the importance of Eucharist. But for instance, in a village where I used to go every once a month to celebrate Eucharist, and unfortunately for the last 3 months I could not go because of the lockdown. The members of the church, who are mostly the senior citizens, elderly ladies, they said that, you know, my granddaughter has internet, and if you cannot come to celebrate Eucharist, we can see you from the video, and you can pray together. We can pray together, and we can have Eucharist. So this is very genuine idea or plan how the lady in the mountain village came up. So I don't think there is any problem to change the frames, to change the formats, if we keep the same spirit. When I was thinking about it, it reminded me of the time when my husband was working in Baghdad for 2 years. So he was away from home, but every evening we would dine together. We would talk via messenger. He would bring his own food. We would bring our own food. We would drink our own tea. He would drink his own tea, but we would be together. Of course, it was not the same as sitting around the same table and eating the same food.
Bishop Rushdin, we have 5 minutes.
Yeah. I'm finishing. But important is not Shabbat, but the human being. And changing the important things, it's where circumcision is not about the feast or celebration, but I think what Apostle Paul says here in Romans and in Corinthians is very much linked how we celebrate important things. Here he speaks about circumcision, which is very important in Jewish tradition and Jewish law, but he speaks about it that the circumcision is not the fleshly thing. It's not about the flesh, but about the heart. So that's how the discussion in the first church, whether to circumcise the people who are not from the Jewish tradition or not. So that's how the decision was made, so that to find out what are fleshly things and what are the heartly things. And another very important example is how Jesus speaks with the Samaritan lady at the well when she asks, where are we supposed to pray? On the mountain here, as our predecessors would do, and as our leaders would tell us, or in Jerusalem? And it's out of blue, Jewish man is telling to a Samaritan woman that neither here nor in Jerusalem, but with the heart and truth. So Jesus is changing absolutely this sacramental geography or sacramental fleshly things and converting everything into spiritual and more genuine dimension. And This is my diagram, and I'm using it as a teacher, as a pastor, and as a person when I want to decide about my own things in my life. So I called it the horizontal and vertical laws. There are a lot of horizontal laws that teach us how to behave, how to dress, how to eat, how to behave, how to walk, everything, which are very important to keep ourselves healthy or keep harmony between the humans. But there is that horizontal law is bound with time and culture and geography and tradition and a lot of things. So, which means it's changeable. It's not universal. But there is a vertical law which is universal and which never changes, and no Grinch can steal that universal law by stealing the present, which is loving the neighbor and loving God. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop President. I'm sure that you have evoked some and provoked some attention for this rather personal and enlightening account that you've given us today. I just have one announcement to make. Unfortunately, because of the ANC's corruption and incompetence here in Cape Town, there's a power cut coming in about 15 minutes' time. So I hope that there'll be enough power for us to continue. So we really need to move on swiftly. And if something does go wrong and we can't continue, then please know it's not, I have just ended this, but I hope that I have sufficient battery power and some lights here to continue, because what's happening in South Africa with this incompetent and corrupt government is just unbelievable. Who would have thought that a fairly advanced country is now sunk to the level of a third-rate banana republic? Anyway, let's open up a discussion very quickly, and so that we focus the question on whoever you wish to ask, and we hope to have some brief, succinct answers, only because we need to rush along this discussion. I would have preferred it for much longer, but we have these other issues to deal with. So the floor is open to anyone. Please identify yourself, your name, and who you want to answer the question that you pose.
Assalamu alaikum, Taj.
Yes.
Nawaz Sharif here. Quick question for Imam Osman. You're a man after my own heart. And I've got written down here, you came up with reason against dogma. And this is a problem I have with people trying to reason with people who will not listen. Because your comments about prayers and how to pray, what to pray, the normal answer I get is, that is why we have to follow the hadith. The Prophet has told us how to do it. What are your comments on that?
Right. Wherever I go, I'm always faced with this question. So I think it's about, I lost count the amount of times I've been asked this. The short answer to it is, so if we look at what the Quran has to say about its status, it says in Surah 2 verse 185, that's Baqarah 185, Ramadan is the month in which was revealed the Quran as a guide to humanity, right? And then you cross-refer that to chapter 17, verse 9, where it says, Inna hadha al-Quran, indeed in this Quran is verily this Quran guides to a way that is most upright, or that is most stable. And in your prayers, in your daily prayers, you ask God to show you that way. And God answers you by saying where to find that way. So where to find that way is in the Quran. And God doesn't say it's in need of a crutch to further explain it. So that's the Quranic answer to it. If people argue that the hadith or a secondary source is necessary for the interpretation of the Quran, then they will have to give us some verse directly saying that, not saying follow God in the Rasul or follow God in the Messenger as an answer, because following the Messenger is not equal to following the Hadith. So if you look at Hadith as a literature, as a work, it only came to the scene, at least for the first time, about 80 years after the Prophet's demise. And through it came political ramblings, etc., to create or to give justification for the competing sects who were competing for power within Islam. And the Quran is absolutely silent on Ali, on Abu Bakr, on Uthman, all these brilliant people. It's completely silent on. And this was an entry, a backdoor entry to try and give legitimacy to these authorities. So even if you examine the early judgment in Muslim law, where the judges were issuing decrees, very little, if no regard, was given to Hadith in terms of giving Islamic law. So the basis of Islamic law has always been the Quran only. And 80 to 100 to 250 years, in fact 250 years later, it became entrenched in Islamic society to then defer to Hadith. So one could have a special discussion on that, but the short answer is the Quran tells us it's the guide. That's God's promise to us. Is God perfect? Yes. Does he make the perfect promise? Yes. If I stick to what's in the Quran, can I go wrong? No, I can't, because he says he's the guide, right? So then what we say is anything that you have as a practice, you don't need to judge whether it's authentic or not. What you need to do is filter that practice through the Quran and say, does it contradict the Quran? If it contradicts the Quran, set it aside. If it doesn't contradict the Quran, you may practice it. What you may not do is ever fight over it. So if you want to pray 2 rakats and the other guy wants to pray 4 units and the other guy wants to pray something different in a different language, there's no reason to fight about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Uthman.
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
Time is short. I just want to move on. Anyone has a question for Rabbi Analia, please? Question or comment directed at Rabbi Analia? Anyone out there?
Taj, good evening. It's Reverend Berry here from Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. I wonder if I may ask a question, please. Thank you so much to all the amazing presenters tonight. Really wonderful stuff. I'm very interested, though, Reverend Dan McVeigh, that you mentioned Psalm 91, and of course, Imam Musa, that you mentioned the vaccine and about we are enablers of science and technology. I love that. But Reverend McVeigh, what is concerning to me is that in Cape Town, we have many people who are using Psalm 91 to say that God will protect us, therefore take that vaccine away, keep it away from us. We don't trust it. We don't want it. Please tell me what is the right and logical and God-centered response to these wonderful people who I'm terrified are going to really cause a lot of mistrust and dissension.
Brief answer, Professor McVeigh.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's a very good question, and I think it's something that's echoed in Christian communities some Christian communities around the world. I think the principle of Psalm 91, which is repeated in many scriptures, is the idea that God is our protector, our provider. We look to him, we trust him, obviously. The question then becomes, in what way does God provide? I want to tell a short little missive about it. You know, the story goes that there was once a man that there was a terrible flood, and there was a fellow who was stranded on the roof of his house during this terrible flood. And so he began praying to God to rescue him. And some neighbors came along with a boat, you know, and said, come, get in the boat. And he said, no, I've prayed to God. God's going to rescue me. And then along comes a helicopter, you know, from the government, you know, rescuing people. And he said, no, I don't need you. God's going to save me. Well, the flood waters continued to rise, and the poor chap drowned. And then in the afterlife, he stood before God and said, you know, God, why didn't you rescue me? He said, well, you idiot, I sent a boat and I sent a helicopter. Why didn't you take advantage of them? So if God is our provider, who are we to question how he will provide? And if he provides through the very what I will call very natural process of science and reason and ability and what we've learned through medical sources. Why should we refuse that as a help? I mean, if someone says they don't want to take the vaccine for this disease or that disease, if there's a specific reason for that specific vaccination to be questioned, okay, fine. But in general, why should Christians or any people of faith reject modern medicine? Why should we reject vitamins? Why should we reject understanding which foods are good for us, which foods are not good for us? So I don't know how to address it other than to say it is a matter of logic and reason and thought and process and giving God the glory for all that he provides humanity's ability to create and to use.
Thank you.
I think, Barry, I would love to address that because
go ahead.
As many times as a medical doctor, it happened to me that people will come with those kind of ideas. I served in a community in Atlanta, which is in the southern part of the United States, in which there's a lot of very strong believers. It's called the Bible Belt. And I do remember many times that parents will come to me and say, like, I will not allow my child to have this transfusion. Let's say, parents in different religions or inside a Christian religion in their own minds. And I always said, we are tools as medical doctors, and this is something that Maimonides in the 12th century will come and say, it's the same time as Avicenna that the Imam was talking about, is Maimonides will come and say, we doctors are tools of God. So basically, we are helping God to help us. If we are asking God to help us, we have to help God to help us. And in the times in which people will come and say we are against any transfusion, or in this case, any vaccination, you come and say, I take the responsibility in my own soul. So that means that me as a medical provider, as an advisor, as a clergy, I take the responsibility of my own soul, because what we are doing is being tools to help God, to help us as humanity.
Thank you very much. Any further comments, questions out there? Please kick it on. Time is tight for us. I mean, I'd like to continue this as long as possible, but we don't know what the power cut situation is going to be. So please take advantage of whatever time we have.
Doctor, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Bishop Rusadan, you had mentioned that debates about the calendar, the Christian calendar, were deeply political and about power. In the context of divisiveness over vaccine and wearing masks and things, have you found ways of helping people to see that there's actually debates about power that's behind this, rather than a more clear-eyed understanding of how God provides?
First of all, good evening. It's wonderful to see you, and thank you for the question. So the debate is huge here, and when you are in minority religious community, and when you're saying that you trust God, but there are different ways how God provides, as Dr. McVeigh said. You're not spotted in a good light. I mean, you're not saying what people want to hear. What I found a very important way to communicate about the topics, wearing masks or vaccination or everything, I think I always had problem to understand love your neighbor as yourself, because loving yourself has never been a good thing. It was considered rather selfish thing. And it has never been as vivid what it means than today. So take care of yourself, and only by taking care of yourself, you can take care of others. So those who want to hear, they do listen, but those who think that these are just minority church sectarians coming up with justification of these satanic modern scientific things. They still continue with that. Unfortunately, church has been the main area where the pandemic, COVID was spread here as well. We have clergies who died, those who said no COVID, no schmovid, or something like that. But yeah, unfortunately, this is something we're fighting until today.
Thank you. Let me ask Shireen out there. Shireen, I'm sure you have comments and questions for all of the speakers, but focus on one if you can.
Thank you, Dr. Taj. Salam alaikum and good evening for such an interesting discussion. I don't have a direct question, Dr. Taj. It's just, but when I looked at the subject for tonight's seminar, my immediate thoughts were, it's not questionable or debatable, as God wouldn't ask us to put our lives at risk. But as individuals, we have a moral and a personal responsibility to protect ourselves, in turn the community, and lessen the burden on hospitals. But as it transpires, the virus and the vaccine has become debatable. When you consider having to tease people into accepting the vaccine by elevating celebrities so that we can see them on social media accepting the vaccine, as well as other prominent people and politicians. There are also, as mentioned, religious groups who are leaving it in the hands of God. And surely the decision is just really our own personal responsibilities as individuals alone, and following government guidelines. So really, it's just a general opinion of mine rather than a direct question. But what I do want to say is that, may I also just end by apologizing for being remiss last Tuesday in wishing Professor McVeigh a blessed Christmas, filled with God's richest blessings, and to all Christian brothers and sisters, and for his amazing discussion last Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Hello.
Yes,
Okay.
who's this? Okay,
I
go
would
ahead.
really like,
Yes, who's this?
and this is Merle Horwitz from Atlanta, Georgia. I
Nice
would
to meet you.
like to thank the Open Mosque for putting on this most incredible program this evening, and I would like to know, is it available for us to put on our Facebook or somehow
Yes,
to
it's,
let other people be aware of it?
yeah,
Because it is without doubt the best conversation I've heard in a while.
it'll be on our YouTube channel by maybe in 2 days' time, and all those who've been registered for this program would be given the link, and then you are free to then pass it along. So we do this every month, and by the way, next month's topic will also be quite interesting. It's the question about immigration. Is there illegal immigration? Okay, and so I think we're going to have a Christian viewpoint, a Muslim viewpoint, a Jewish viewpoint, and so we try to do all of these hot button issues, getting the three faiths together and to talk in a civilized manner, and we agree to disagree, and also, but most importantly, we're all learning from each other, and that's the rationale for this group and for this effort. So we are very thankful for Rabbi Alania, for Imam Osman Musa, for Professor Dan McVeigh, and of course for Bishop Rusudan. And they've given us, their time and their talent and their insights, and they've inspired us in many, many ways. So we still have some more time, so let's get anyone. I'm trying to squeeze as much time out of this before the power cut happens. So is there anyone else needs to make a comment? Kasim, what about you? Aneta, Dawood, come on, guys. Use your few minutes left. Yes, Kasim, go for it.
Okay, so firstly, thank you again for putting together this beautiful and learning. And I mean, I don't think I've ever learned this much. except for in an open-minded environment where we can listen to each other and agree to disagree and agree to agree. So I want to just basically ask a question to everyone quickly. COVID-19 killed about 1.8 million people so far. The deaths, total deaths this year in the world is 58.7 million.
Infections.
There are the deaths, total deaths.
Okay.
Outside of COVID as well. 848 million people are undernourished. There are 28,000 people approximately who died of hunger today. There are approximately 841,000 deaths this year caused by water-related diseases. There are about 795 million people who do not have access to safe drinking water, for example. And the list goes on and on and on and on. COVID-19 is important. We need to isolate. We need to do whatever we can to save lives. And that's the common thread amongst
So what's your
all
question?
religions and anyone with.
Question?
So my question is, how do we extend our revived sensitization to preserve life beyond COVID as people of faith?
Okay,
To
so
everyone.
okay,
Whoever
so
wants to
we'll do it in reverse order. Bishop Rusadan, then Osman Musa, and then Professor Dan, and then Rabbi Alania. Okay, so Rusadan, please go ahead.
That's a very difficult question, and I don't think I have a proper answer, because that's a very difficult thing. People are dying, those who are not infected by COVID, but those who are starving, those who are who have different problems, so that are not addressed by the modern world. I think COVID has taught us, but I don't think we have learned something about it, that we are all humans and equally fragile in front of this problem. But we are not in the same boat, as Rabbi said. We sometimes, some of us are more protected than the others. Some of us has access to the vaccine. Some of us does not. I don't think a vaccine would reach Georgia very soon, and things like that. So, but the hierarchy that exists in this modern universe, that some lives matter more than the others, that is the universal problem, the universal question. And I think that the people who claim, like us, who claim that they believe in God or believe in goodness, we need to try to change things, that the people who are disadvantaged, who have different environments and less happiness around, we need to try to reach them. I don't know how, I don't know what can be done, but I think that understanding of humanity needs to be revised, and that's our duty.
Thank you. Now, Imam Usman Musa in Pretoria.
Qasim, I think that's a very important question. You know, in my presentation, I mentioned those 3 points that are imperative in Islamic society from a Quranic perspective, and the one is the saving of human life. So that is across all religions. The thing is that God's given us the objective that we must achieve. How we go about achieving that is left to us. And I think the one thing that religion has has failed to do, and that is execute. We understand the command very well, but to execute on that command, we've done a very bad job. Because if you were doing any job, we would never have this type of stats where you have a couple of million children dying every day as a result of starvation. And one of the problems is that we've left the powers that be to operate as a law unto themselves. We've allowed science to become a slave of capitalism as well. And that's the problem of religion, is that, and I speak it within the Islamic community, is that the way we've abandoned science, for example, a lot of these answers to solving the world's issues, the poverty crisis, the clean water, etc., can only be solved through science. And because we've made science a product of capitalism, we've divorced religion from science. We've allowed the capitalists to capitalize on science, and you can see from the COVID vaccine as well. Many are, some of the greatest billionaires will come out this year due to the vaccine, and good for them. But it's bad for religion per se, because had the mosques, for example, conscientized their young followers, and the imam stood up and said to people, endorse science, but make sure that when you produce science, that it's available to the world to use, and use that as a yardstick. Make the Darul Ulooms, who have got hundreds and thousands of students, become more aware of simple science, like the natural remedies, etc., that can solve some of these issues. So I think religion has got a big part to play in this. It's unfortunately the mindset that we need to address, that we need to bring science into religion and take out the commercial motivation from it. That if there's no commercial gain for you, it's not the end of the world. What you need to see is the saving of life as an imperative, and put that as your priority. Unfortunately, now it's just working the other way around. So I'm not talking of communism and socialism or anything. What I'm saying is, you've got children dying out there. What are we as people of faith going to do about it? Because we're going to account to God in the year after. And I think there's a lot we can do about it by simply changing mindsets. If you've got these young engineers going out and becoming independent thinkers, you won't be having this debate about whether the vaccine is good or not, because you'll have independent science to confirm that as well. People will be more orientated towards scientific thinking. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And then Professor McVeigh.
We cannot hear you. Unfortunately, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Kasim, once again for a great question. And I appreciate my co-presenters and their comments. Jesus said, as recorded in the gospel in Matthew, that he said, more or less, let me summarize. He said, people want to worship God. People want to do good. And on the day of judgment, when we give account, a question that will be asked is, how did we treat the poor, the hungry, the imprisoned, the marginalized? Jesus took the marginalized and made them the center of the story. This is the judgment of our faith and our spirituality. How do we treat the poor? How do we treat those who are weak and marginalized? And thus, I think in any tragedy, what opens our eyes in life is tragedy. Someone will endure a heavy loss or a terrible illness. How do we respond? We say, oh, had I known this? Oh, my life has changed now. Now my family means so much to me. I want my life to be meaningful. Unfortunately, in the natural cycles of things, we do have illness, we do have death, we do have these types of problems. And this is not the last virus that will come. My brother is one of the leading world experts in coronaviruses. He told me years ago, it's just a matter of time. Viruses are going to come and they're going to strike the population. It's inevitable. It happens. These are cycles of the natural order of things, as I'm sure Rabbi Dr. Analia could tell us even more. So in these natural tragedies, our eyes are opened. Hopefully it will continue incrementally, step by step, to open our eyes as people of faith, to serve the world, to serve through our faith and through our relationships. C.S. Lewis, a great Christian writer and philosopher, said, relating to the question of why is there suffering in the world? Why does God allow human beings to suffer so much? He said he didn't fully understand it, but he said this: suffering is God's megaphone to shout to the world and wake us up, to go the directions we need to go, to think of other people, to rely on love and care and compassion to make the world a better place. And perhaps COVID, as bad as it is, one thing it has done for us, it has created a greater awareness of one another through the digital world we now live in. And we can raise our voices. Look at this platform today. Kudos to Dr. Taj and the Open Mosque and the Oxford Institute for British Islam for bringing these and other similar, programs. So our question then to us is, these new voices that are being heard today, where do we go? Where does this move us to as people of faith?
Kasim, I would love to go back to your question, because your question is a very important one. We are only focusing right now about COVID, but actually the question is, how do we maintain our attention to the ones who not necessarily is a global endemic or a global epidemic, but actually the ones who are affecting different societies that are far away from our reality, but are there. And it's humanity that is asking us to respond in every single instance, and not just during the time in which it's a globalized that affects each one of us. So let me respond with the following. First of all, the Talmud in the Tractate of Sanhedrin will say, the one who saves one life is as if he's saving the entire world. Judaism is a religion of action, not just a prayer, not just a response to, it's a religion of action. We take action to do that. And one of the greatest philosophers that we have in the 20th century that was a Holocaust survivor, that suffered during the time of the Shoah, during the time of the Holocaust, under the Nazi big murder for all of us. He came up with this idea. His name was Emmanuel Levinas, and Emmanuel Levinas will come with the concept of the other. When you look at the others in the eyes, when you put the picture of a person that is claiming for justice, that is claiming for attention, when it's not just a statistic, when it's not just a name, which is not just something that is in the records, but it's the one that you look one-on-one, that becomes human in front of you, that's when you act. And that's when you are asked, regardless of any religion, to be more human, to be the tool of God, and to act in every single aspect of life. And the answer is in our hands. The answer in the 21st century, with technology, with vaccination, with pictures that can show, as Shireen was asking, that can show that we leaders are taking those vaccinations and we should become role models to the others. The answer is in our hands.
Thank you. I think we've heard some remarkably frank and candid points of view here. I'm just sorry that we can't continue with this, because power has really been cut off here, and I don't know how long this laptop will be functioning. So instead of risking this, us being cut off midway, can I thank everyone for turning up, number one, but mainly we need to thank our four great speakers. I mean, each of them provided such insights and illumination that we all learned something. And I think this is the whole purpose of these forums, for us to learn from each other, for to be respectful. And as Kasim said, we can agree to agree and we can agree to disagree. And I think today we've dealt with some degree of success on how to deal with this type of pandemic and pestilence, not only in times of religious celebrations, but throughout the year. And I would like to invite all of you for next month's webinar on immigration. And in other words, do people have a right to migrate anywhere in the world, irrespective of whatever documentation or they have or not? Or can countries limit such and introduce such a thing as illegal immigration? So I think this is again a very topical issue, and it affects South Africa, Britain, Israel, everywhere. And we now have, currently, I believe, over 100 million migrants throughout the world. Some of them are legal, some of them are so-called illegal. And I think it's a very important topic for the three faiths to discuss, not only in terms of politics, but most importantly, in terms of our respective scriptures. So let me start to thank Rabbi Analia. I think everyone give her a big round of applause. I think she's done a tremendous job tonight, and we've all learned tremendously. And thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Rabbi Dr. Analia. I really appreciate that. Then we come to Professor Dan McVeigh, a long-time supporter of the Open Mosque. He's also done brilliant tonight. I think we learned again so much from him. Then we have a newcomer to our group here, Imam Usman Musa from Pretoria, and again, a wonderful presentation there. So please show your appreciation. And then finally, we have Bishop Rusadan from Tbilisi in Georgia. Again, a remarkable and candid and honest appraiser, opinion piece. And I think we all learned much about that. So once again, thanks everyone for coming to us. And we have to cut short this discussion. I would have preferred it to go longer. I'm sure some of you would have wanted it as well, but unfortunately, given our wonderful ANC government, this is not possible tonight. Thank you, everyone. Good night, and we see you again. Thank you.
All right.